Welcome to the Queer Love Podcast, the silly and serious shenanigans of two queer relationship coaches. I am your host, Elizabeth Cunningham.
And I'm your host, Lee Greeps.
On this podcast, we talk about how to live your best queer life with fulfilling, healthy relationships and anything else that makes your little queer heart happy. Because living your life outside of the heteronormative scripts is totally possible for you.
Each episode, we explore all things queer love from our professional perspective as relationship coaches, our own personal experiences, and as partners.
If you love our show, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at Queer Love Relationships. You can also check out our website, www.queerloverelationships.com.
Thanks for following us and enjoy this episode.
And I've also fallen into the trap of taking it personally when it's look at all these things that I'm doing aren't making you happy, right? And making that about me. And it's it's a little cringy, looking back on it, but it's okay, hindsight 2020. I'm having compassion for myself. I've learned, I've grown. Hello, and welcome to the Queer Love Podcast. Woo, 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 woo.
I'm actually doing that different, I was trying to change the tone of it because it often will not be present in the recording. I go too high pitched.
Because of Zoom. You know what we could do? Is we could record this in the editor. In Descript. We could do that.
Well, here we are.
We'll do it on the next one. I wonder if that would change it because sometimes it cuts off my laugh. Zoom cuts off my laugh because my laugh gets too loud or too high.
Zoom is nope, shutting it down.
No happiness for you.
And that's all I was I wonder if they'll catch that.
Whenever I laugh on Zoom recordings, I'm I wonder if that'll actually show up because it often doesn't, which is unfortunate because my laugh is great.
As are my woo-woos.
That's true. That's facts.
Yeah. I've perfected them over the years.
It's a skill.
It is.
Highly coveted skill.
It is. Have it on my resume. It's the first thing, actually.
Tell the good people what we're talking about today.
How did we phrase it? It was lesbians wanting soft lives for each other.
Yeah, nailed it.
Nailed it. Just lesbians. Dramatic pause.
We're talking about lesbians today.
That would be great. I would love to talk about lesbians.
What a broad topic.
I know. It's the possibilities.
I know. So many possibilities.
But in this broad topic of lesbians, we're specifically diving into lesbians and their desire for soft lives for each other.
Inspired by a TikTok video.
And I was what did that come from? Please enlighten us more on this topic.
No, it was I was scrolling through TikTok.
Give us the details. I want to be there with you in this experience, in this recollection.
Well, like you do, you get lost in scrolling through TikTok and all sane people, mostly your TikTok is filled with lesbians.
Lesbians, puppies, and cats.
I had a friend of mine who is a white cis man, and he was so TikTok thinks that I'm a Black lesbian, and I am not mad about it.
Go for it.
He's these are the videos that I'm being shown, and he's I feel a little intrusive, but I also am really loving this content.
Lesbians provide quality content.
Lesbians do provide quality content. Anyway, so I was scrolling through TikTok. There's a lot of lesbian content on my TikTok, and one of the videos that popped up was just like the POV videos or whatever, and it was literally just this person who was holding up the camera to their mirror, and you could see like their, sweats. They were just wearing sweats, and they were like something about point of view, lesbians, like the urge for lesbians to want to create soft lives for each other, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And there's also videos that pop up on my feed that are like what it's like to date to like lesbians posting videos of what it's like to date women who have mostly dated men.
Trip.
which is Lee's point of view.
Yeah.
With me and your other partner.
I'm like, what?
Just like currently you are dating two people who have mostly only dated men. And so yeah, I'm still in the phase of like being in queer relationships where I'm like, oh, like this is new, this is different, this is really nice. And so that was that's what we wanted to talk about, was like when you start, well, like not necessarily like what was it? How did I put it? Yeah, just because did we want to talk about the contrast, or did we just want to talk about like lesbians wanting to create soft lives for each other?
I mean, we can kind of, I
Or a
think
little bit of both.
I feel like both are warranted. Like, I mean, because you can talk to the contrast of it, from your experience,
Right.
and like, yeah, I mean, then we'll talk about why, just want soft lives,
just want
for one another.
So what is
What's a soft
what is
life?
soft life? What does a soft life mean? And one of the things, so again, like in this TikTok video, then it was like, oh, doing these things for each other, like oh, like going to the grocery store and just picking up something for the other person because you know that you like that. Like the other day, Lee went to the grocery store and found this like little coffee drink that was on sale. And I like experimenting with like new little coffee drinks. And so they got it because they were like, oh, like E loves experimenting with new little coffee drinks and it's on sale. And I also love buying things on sale.
Man. Bonus points when I tell her that it was on sale.
I love it. Just makes my little Midwest heart happy. Just so happy. Just like you and Alec, whenever I get excited about something, are like, how much was the sale?
It's true.
I came over to Alec's house one day and I don't remember what it was. I think it was like a new sweater or something like that. It was a new sweater. And I was just like, oh my God. And he was like, oh my God, is that a new sweater? And I was like, yes. And he was like, how much was the sale?
So true.
And I was like, oh my God, let me tell you about it. It was this price, but then I got it for this price.
I do. I get excited when I see things that I want to get you and it's on sale because I'm like, I'm going to tell her it was on sale. It's part of the gift experience.
It is part of the gift experience. It is. It makes me happy. Who cares why something makes you happy sometimes? We don't need to question everything, I really feel that way, like, especially in coaching, the side tangent, like, especially in coaching and especially in coaching spaces, there's the want and there's the tendency and there's like the real, benefit to like questioning things. Like that's a lot of what coaching is. A lot of what coaching is just like, why do you feel that way? Or like, why is that for you? Or what happened in your past that like now has you believe that thing? Right. So it's a lot of like questioning and sometimes like there was one, I just remember this one group call that I was on where I was a participant of, and this woman was just like, well, why? Like, why do I do that? And the guy who was leading the call was like, I don't think that we need to find the answer for absolutely everything. in order for you to like move forward. And I was just like, oh, well said, sir. Like, because that's not, sometimes we can get caught up in that, you know? Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Then your
side tangent. So it's just like, yeah, sales make me happy and I'm not going to question it. Anyway, so leading soft lives. But yeah, like picking things up for each other at the store, or like knowing that knowing things that like make your partner happy and just like doing it just because, or just like because it's convenient. It's like, oh, like you need to mail this thing, like I'm going out, like I'll go mail that for you. Like just noticing and like being aware of what your partner, what might make things easier for your partner, you know, or like knowing that you really like soft fluffy things. Or like last night we had date night, and like, and I love question games too, but like Lee loves question games. Loves. Oh
my God.
Loves questioning it. So like last night when we were like midway through date night, we were at a park, which by the way, we went to a park which Lee also loves.
So
and
good.
it was a new park that Lee had never been to before.
He's keeping secrets. Secrets. What is this?
Anyway, yeah, but it was so great. And it was just like, I know that they really love like going to parks. I know that they love being in nature. So I was like, oh, you know what we should do for date night is we should go to this park and like be in nature. And like, and then when we were there, I was like, oh, when we go home, like we should we should turn on the fire and we should play the card question game or whatever. And just like their little puppy face. I was like, and I even think I said that. I was like, oh my God. I was like, if you were a puppy right now, your tail would be wagging so hard.
That's so true.
And so just like little, just noticing the little things also is like having a soft life. What else for you would be living like a soft life?
I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of components of the, like what you were saying, thoughtfulness and like consideration. And it's like really, I mean, for me, the essence of it is just like, is really looking out for each other in like a way that is like, you want, I mean, and I think this is where that's why I'm like, it's hard for me because I don't have like the experience of not. You know, like I hear some stuff with like women who, you know, date men, and obviously it's not every hetero dynamic and all those kinds of things. Not every man, all these things. But
I don't know about that.
Well, I don't know about that at all.
It's to different degrees.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
talk
Well,
about
there
that.
we go. So, you know, where like I hear, yeah, like women tell me of whatever experiences, and I'm like, what? Like that sounds terrible. Like it's like you're not being looked out for. Like it's like really much like we're together, we're looking at, like it's like I want a comfy life for you, right? And it's like, what does that look like? A comfy, soft life that could look like legitimately soft things, because she loves soft things.
I love soft things.
She loves soft,
I love
fluffy things. And so it's like, I think about that when we're
we
somewhere.
have so many blankets.
Yeah, like when we're somewhere, I'm like, oh my God, let me, like, you need a thing. Or like, why don't you put a sweater on? What are you doing?
I know, this morning I was like, what should I wear? And Lee was like, a nice, comfy, cute sweater. And I was like, well, obvious.
But it's like, you know, like, and so it's just really thinking about it, and you're doing it in just like, oh, like just simple ways that it just makes life feel soft, because life is challenging. And so yeah, just bringing in that extra element around it, and doing, and it again is coming from a place like an intention of like, oh, we're helping each other out, not like I have to make sure you're okay, and like, or you know, that kind of thing, or like, oh, this is, this is all that I can do, or like, this is my value kind of thing. Like, it's like, no, like we're just looking out for each other. And it's coming from that like genuine, soft, loving space, which I think also connects into like for women or folks like raised as women, like you do get, raised with that idea of like the caretaker, the nurturer. And I mean, you tend to have that kind of like innate ability. And so I think that also just comes into play where now there's two of you doing it and you're like, oh.
Yeah, and that's kind of the part that I wanted to add in about like, this is not like ragging on straight men necessarily. Necessary. Well, because it's true, because like I know the straight men who I've dated, or straight men that I've known or have coached or friends with or family with, it's not that they don't want good lives for their partner. Like, that's not what we're saying. It's more that like our idea of what that looks like is very different, and it definitely can, like, some of it can be traced back to like how we were raised, and like what we were taught to pay attention to, and what we were taught like our roles are, and what, because it's like I'm thinking of a conversation that I had recently with a guy who is they're, a straight couple, and he was talking about just having some difficulties in their relationship, because people call me and, tell me their difficulties in their relationships, because that's literally my job. But like part of his difficulty was this, where he was like, I'm doing all these things and she still doesn't seem to be satisfied with that. And I was like, well, are you doing the things that you think need to be addressed? Or are you doing the things that feel connecting for her? And that's where the disconnect was, right? Like, he was like, I am, working these jobs. I am like creating, and this is something in my experience with dating men as well. Like, one of the things that seems to be common, again, these are broad generalizations. So, but like seems to be common is like creating experiences, like buying tickets to somewhere, or going out to a dinner, or like going on a vacation, or like doing something like
event,
whatever. And it's not that those things aren't fun and great and awesome. It's just that might not be like connecting to your partner. It might be. You might be totally events people. And I know straight couples who are like, they're events people, and like that's totally connecting for them.
That's different,
right?
Story.
Different story, different scenario. But sometimes that's not, and so you are, you're doing these things where you think that you're doing things to like really foster the relationship, where your partner is like, she'd rather you bring her home groceries. She'd rather you, do some errands for her. She'd rather you, remember that she loves cozy, fluffy things, and to snuggle her up in date night and like buy her favorite wine, or, she'd rather you do that. Right. And so it's not that you're not being thoughtful. You're just not being as thoughtful as you could be. Like, you're being thoughtful in a way that you think you're being thoughtful, instead of in a way that like she would feel like thought of. Right. So it's like being thoughtful in relationships is like, how would this person feel thought of? Right. Because there's certainly things that I could do in our relationship where I would think that it was really fun and great and awesome, but you would not feel thought of, like events. It
depends on the event.
It depends.
I'm like, take me to a fancy event. Treat me like a pretty girl.
Yeah.
You know?
No, but there's definitely certain like uh yeah, but that would be very specific, right? Like it's not just like because some people are, it's just like events, like they want to go do things.
Yeah, like
right?
events in general.
Right, where it's like if I just signed us up for any old event, that wouldn't be me.
Yeah, like it
thinking
was just
of,
like,
you
okay,
know.
we're doing an event, and it'd be like, okay, what's the event?
Right. What are we doing? Yeah, where if it was like, hey, I got us tickets to Tegan and Sarah.
Yeah, talk about soft lesbian lives.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that would be a different story,
like,
right?
oh my
But
God.
it's like it's just that extra thoughtfulness, you know? And that's what I find is like missing. And then the breakdown of it I find in again in my personal experience, but also in my professional experience in working with people, the breakdown is that then usually the guy gets frustrated because he does feel like he's doing a lot, which he is, but it's not being received well. And it's like, okay, you're making this about you, right? Like I see you trying to do really well, but you're making it about you and how much you're doing for the relationship rather than trying to find the connection of why it's not landing and what would actually land with your partner. And I think that that's like the biggest difference in like, lesbians wanting each other to lead soft lives is that there is that more connection of like, what would actually work for you? Not like what would show you that I'm doing something for the relationship.
Right.
What would actually work for you? Like, it's not about showing, it's not about doing. It's about like the being in the other person's experience and their world and what they need and what makes them happy and what would be helpful for them or what would like relieve something from them. And like that's what I also see in like videos and commentary about like how do I want to say that? Like videos and commentary about how, yeah, just that frustration piece with men, right? Where they're like, oh, like, I just don't, if you just told me, blah, 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 blah. And like, my guess is that, like, first of all, your partner may have told you.
Oh no.
And then the other part is like, you also need to be a little bit more observant and to ask better questions. Like that's the other part here. Like there needs to be a little bit more investigation on your part. And like that learning of observing with your partner. And that's kind of what and again, like
that is such a thing though.
It's so
I'm like thinking about like clients of mine that are guys and they're talking about like their wives or whatever. And I'm just like I'll like they'll say something around like, oh yeah, I want to help her or whatever. And I'm like, well, what does she find supportive? And they're just like, well, I could get flowers. And I'm like, I mean, if she likes flowers, for sure that's nice. But like what feels like if like I think of a specific example of like a woman who is like working a lot, and like just like on a project. And so the like partner husband wanted to help her more, or like help her like because she's stressed out, overwhelmed, all those things. So it's like the intention is there, but it's like it was like, oh yeah, like I got her this thing and I brought her this, like, but it wasn't anything that was like actually helpful. Right? Like it's like, yeah, thank you. What? Like, and I remember thinking about that because it's like in my experience with in partnerships with women, it's like there is more of that attunement and like observation of like, oh yeah, like if I know E is like stressed out or having a lot going on with, work and things like that, like me just being like, here's some flowers and keep going. Like I'd be like, yeah, she likes flowers.
I do like flowers.
Yeah, but that's
that
not
wouldn't
gonna
be
be
very helpful.
Yeah,
like
that's
I'd
not
be
gonna
like,
be
thanks.
Yeah,
That's
like
very sweet of
yeah,
you.
like that's not gonna feel like supportive, right? Versus like, oh, like, maybe it's like I've noticed that she hasn't eaten. So like I bring her just some food, like, hey, like drop this food, or like, "Oh, here's your favorite, you love kombucha. Like I want to give you a kombucha, or I come by and I'm like, hey, let me like rub out your shoulders a little bit, or just like things like that where it's like that's going to support the situation, right? Because it's like things of that nature, or making sure that it's like she's comfy.
Right. Or like when we had George the cat, like taking care of George, like when I got really busy with work, you'd be like, "Oh, I fed George," or like I did the litter,
Yeah, like
or
medication,
yeah,
all
she
that
had
stuff.
all of her meds and she's like, "Oh, I gave Georgie her meds," like just things like that where it's like, or I watered the plants, like taking things off of my list of things
Yeah,
to
that's
do,
another thing that I'll like be like,
like
hey, do we need to do this? Like, or if like, like the other week where she had the crazy week, and I was like, we had therapy scheduled, and I was like, how about we don't have therapy,
Yeah, it was launching the how to have difficult conversations
Right. Like it
course.
was like, how about we
Yeah.
don't do that? Because that seems more stressful. And I'll send the message to like our therapist and all that stuff. And she was like, oh my God, thank you.
Right.
And
Like that just gave me 2 more hours of time.
yeah, and then it's like, and it's not like, oh yeah, okay, we won't do it. Well, can you send the message then? Like if I said that to her.
Be like, okay.
Right, because it's like it's just that like added thing, like where it's just like, oh, let me just kind of look at that, or for the instance of maybe she's usually the one that cooks or does this thing or whatever, and it's like, oh, she has a busy week, like, hey, I would love to like, make you don't have to cook this week, right? Like I'll take care of food, or I'll, whatever it is, right? I'll take care of the pets, I'll take care of the whatever.
Mhm.
So
It's just like it's like being situationally aware in your relationship,
yeah, which is
right?
so wild to me to not have, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think that it's a skill. It's a learned skill. Like again, I want to show, some compassion for the dudes because it's just like I know that most men want to, you
Yeah,
know,
like they want to do it.
want to do things that are helpful in their relationships. Like they want to have good relationships, but it's like you have to look in a different place than you've been used to looking because I feel like as people who are, socialized and raised as like boys,
Mhm.
like you're taught more of that, like doing, like provider, like you
Yeah,
have
it's
to,
the provider, the
yeah,
doer.
yeah, provider, doer, all of that stuff. And when you're in that mindset, you're looking either at what you can do
Hmm.
or what's out here in the world that you could do.
Hmm.
And so it is a lot more, it's ironically a lot more about you than it is about like actually providing in the relationship.
Hmm.
Because if you're providing in the relationship, then you're looking at your partner.
Hmm.
You're looking at the relationship. Like you're being more like you use the word attuned,
Hmm.
right? And so yeah, I think that in like queer femme relationships or like lesbian relationships, um, uh, that that attunement is easier to be found because that's also like how we were socialized as well,
Hmm.
is to be like more on the lookout for that. But I will say though that I was raised in a more masculine environment,
Hmm.
and so this is also something that I've had to learn. Like I
Yeah.
like I have been the partner who's like the quote unquote provider, right?
Hmm.
In past relationships especially, where it's like I've done that. Like I have looked at just like what I'm doing or what I could do instead of like looking in the relationship and like seeing what's there and like what my partner needs and et cetera, et cetera. And I've also like fallen into the trap of like taking it personally when it's like, look at all these things that I'm doing aren't making you happy, right? And making that about me. And it's like, it's a little cringy, like looking back on it, but it's like, okay, hindsight 2020. I'm having compassion for myself. I've learned, I've grown.
Yeah, no,
but it's like, but at the same, and that's also why I have a lot of like compassion and empathy for like people who were raised in that more like, and I use the word masculine very loosely. I mean more in like the societal way that we use masculinity, not in kind of like what it actually could mean. But like what we've coined as masculinity here in the 1900s, 2000s.
Yeah. And it's also like, as you were talking, I was just thinking about, it's like, it's not even, I mean, I think women would understand this, not even being in a lesbian relationship, but like, female friendships. And it's like, I mean, I'm just like thinking back on like when I was in college and like my friends who are chicks who were, dating guys or whatever, but I'm like being way more thoughtful and considerate towards them than their male partners are. And they're just like, and like, even just in the friendship aspect of that, and they're just like, what? Like, oh, you got that for me, or you're looking out for me or whatever. Because I would be like, hey, like if I knew friends were like stressed out and it's like, oh, I'll come sit with you in the library, and like, so you're not like alone or whatever. And just like things like that. Or if like I knew that like people were like out late because like I'd be like in late classes. And like I had friends that are like, oh, they didn't like to walk home alone or whatever, that were females, which makes sense. And so I would always be like, oh, I'll just stay on campus a little bit longer and I'll walk with you like home and stuff like that. And it's just like that is just like, yeah, that happens in like lesbian partnerships too, because it's like you're thinking about that, but it's just like seeing the contrast of their experiences as they're dating guys who are like not attuned to that, right? Like it's just like the simple little things and just being like, what? And then, but that's why like I had chicks be like, oh my God, is this what it's like to date women? Like this is crazy. Because it's like, like I was like, maybe they didn't really have a friend that like was lesbian or whatever. And so they like, I'm the first experience. And they're just like, oh my God, what? Like how many times I was told like, oh man, if I was gay, you and me, and I'm like, you are a little gay because you thought about it.
We're all a little bit more gay than we think we are, and that's
you just got stopped at the sex part. I know you did.
Yeah.
Everything else though, you were on board, you were on track.
Oh my God.
But I think it's also the I mean, there's like all kinds of elements in it, but it's also the emotional intelligence too that is often present for women in a different way than men. I mean, and again, it comes down to like how you were raised, but like even like for you, like you were raised in a more like masculine upbringing and things, and so it's like, yeah, emotions are still a little challenging in that space. Right? So it's like it really comes down to like how you're raised and everything, but there's something innate in, I think it's also when you are living with a body that runs on a cycle, that monthly cycle, like there's also that element too, because it's like you're more attuned to that experience, like that experience, right? Like, assuming that like that's all what works in your body, it's like then you're like, oh yeah, I understand that feeling for sure. Like and so I think it's also just the rhythm of life that you're working on, like even in that biological sense, then also creates that experience of like being like, yeah, I'm here, like, oh, you're there, that's where you're at in it for sure, man. Like I'm not even questioning that. I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, this girl's just on her period again, like great, it's the worst. It's like it is the worst, actually. Like, and being like, hey, like, let me look out for you in that sense. And yeah, I don't even know what it's like to freaking date a person that does not have that experience. I'd be like So much to explain.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the thing, is that it there is more to explain. And also what came up for me in you sharing that is like there's also the tendency to fall into those like roles, like even subconsciously or even like without even thinking about it, to fall into the roles of like, oh yeah, like I'm just on my period or whatever, and just kind of like brushing it off, or just being like not not calling out men for saying like not helpful things around your period.
Did that.
You know? Because you're just like, because it is just one of those things where it's like, I either don't want to educate you, or like it's just like, well, this is just the way that it is, or it's just like I just don't have the mental bandwidth and capacity right now to like come back with anything at you. So I'm just whatever, I'm just gonna let that slide.
Yeah.
You know, and just like things like that. And it's not even like mean things, it's just like untrue things.
Yeah.
Or like not compassionate, like not understanding.
Yeah, like because it's also like it just kind of gaslights your experience, right? Like, oh,
Right.
like, oh, you're just on your period.
Yeah, just things like that where it's like, I know that he's not meaning it in a malicious way. And so it's also hard to call things out, especially for women.
Yeah.
It's hard to call things out when you know, because you're the understanding one. Like, because you know that it's not malicious. And so it's hard to call it out, because then you're like, well, if I call it out, then he'll get defensive. And then I'll have to deal with that defensiveness, even though I knew that he didn't mean it maliciously. And so it's like, is the emotional labor to like combat this comment
while you're
like
bleeding,
while I'm on my period, like even worth it?
No.
You know, and then you're just like, it just becomes like this kind of fuck it moment.
Yeah.
And but it's like, but if that happens every single month over years, that really wears down on you. And so it's like, I also understand like why women complain about their male partners so much, even if it's not productive, because it's like, well, you've been dealing with this for years.
Yeah.
So like, I also understand that behavior, even if it, isn't productive. So, but it's like, it's just kind of those things where it's just like, with the first time that I was in a queer relationship, and yeah, I had my period and didn't have to explain anything to my partner. And my partner was like just asking me how I was doing and just seeing what I needed. Just that. And that's the thing. That's honestly why the contrast is so infuriating sometimes, because it's literally
not
just like
anything crazy.
Because it's not crazy. We're not asking for like special treatment. We're just asking for you to ask us about how we feel. Like that's it. Like, I just want you to say, "Oh, I'm sorry. How are you feeling right now? Do you need anything?" That's it. That's all I want you to say.
For all the few brosifs out there that listen to this podcast, that was for you,
That's it. Like it's, and I think also like why it's so wild, like why the disconnect is so wild, is because it is really like simple. Like it's not anything crazy. It's not like this thing that you've never heard of before that's a secret behind lesbian locked doors. It really is just like basic
Yeah.
human understanding and compassion and just like softness, just softness. It's just softness.
And as you were saying that too, like I know this from like earlier dating and like from I am the first experience of a queer relationship, and the also not even just on the like me offering whatever the simple thing is that's like feels good and they're like, what, never had this. But it's also on the receiving side too, of like when you know, like maybe that you did something for me or, you know, made sure and like did something that was like super like, oh, so thoughtful. Oh my God. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I'm just like, oh, thank you. Like that meant a lot. Or like, you know, whatever. Just like again, simple, not like, oh cool, thanks, babe. Like, you know, or whatever, not even noticed. Like, because I think that's kind of what it can
It just feels like a brush off.
yeah, like it feels like a brush off, like versus like a pause to like receive and like yesterday Elizabeth got the little lights, the little light tripod thing, you know, and she was like, oh, I got this, and it's like she's thinking about it because it's like, oh, that way you can do like the sound healing stuff and like it has the lights and like da 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 da, and I'm just like, oh my God, like, oh, that is so amazing. And I was like, oh my God, thank you, I love you, and like just like, you know, versus been like, oh yeah, cool, and like walk away or something. You know, but in that sense of like I've seen that as well in like me receiving or me giving gratitude appreciation to someone, like to the chick who hasn't really received that, and when they do it and they're like, oh, you like it, like wait, is it good, like oh wait, is, you know, and it's like the, oh, like you actually are seeing the thoughtfulness, right? Like you're seeing it,
Right.
and acknowledging it, right? Like not just brushing it off or not just even not noticing it. And I think that's like also another experience that I've seen too, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm actually being received.
Right.
That's nice.
And
Because that also softens you too.
yeah, no, totally. And even just like, and I remember that was something that, because like Lee does a lot around the house. And I do things around the house too, but like Lee does more around the house than I do. And I like wanted to, this was like when we first started, was this when we first moved in together, right? I think. Or maybe it was when we weren't living together, but you were like coming over and like you would like come over and just like do my dishes. You know?
Helping out.
I think it was when we weren't living together and you were just coming over and you'd be like, oh, and you just like walk in the kitchen, like do my dishes or like, you know, something like that or whatever. And I was just like, and I was like blown away. I was just like, and I felt so like, I felt like I needed to do something in return. Like I felt like I'm like, oh, I need to reciprocate this somehow. I need to now do a gesture that is equal or similar to, you know, your gesture, right? Which I think it's just like this learned pattern of behavior of just like, oh, if you do this, then I need to do this. And if you do that, then I need to do this. Rather than, we had this conversation and I said this, I was just like, I feel bad. Like I feel guilty for you doing these things because I feel like I can't reciprocate in the same way. And through this conversation, you were just like, I just want, you know, it would just mean a lot to just hear your gratitude for it. Like, that's all I need. If you just tell me that you're just like super grateful for, you know, me helping you out, like, that's all I need. And it like blew my mind because I was like, that's it. That's all you, are you sure? Are you sure? That is all you need. Are you sure? Yeah. Are you sure that this is not building resentment? Are you positive? No. And like, but then I was like, okay, well, I'm so fucking grateful that you like, I am beyond grateful that you have blown my mind. I am just like, I am so grateful that you came over to my house and like did my dishes because my dishes needed to be done.
Yeah, like because it's like my thought process is homegirl working so much, right? Like, and it's like, I mean, but the simple thing, like dishes are obviously not a crazy task. Like it's not gonna take a long time.
And I was living by myself. Yeah, so like it's not like there was a ton of dishes. Yeah,
like it's, you know, like wild. But I'm like, oh, that would help her. So like even when she has a break, she doesn't have to go, oh man, I gotta do my dishes. Right. Like it's like, oh, I have a break. Oh, I can have a break. Like that's it. I don't have to do something else. I don't have to like, or be thinking about like, oh man, I gotta clean this or that or what have you. Right. And it's like, so like that's my intention. So I was like, oh yeah, let me just help out. Boop, boop, boop. And it's like, yeah, her just being like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like,
right. And it doesn't have to be, it's like, and that's the other thing about like this it's almost like a mindset. It's like a mindset and a practice of like allowing for each other and giving each other and providing for each other this softness, right? And we're using the word softness, and I'm sure that you could use a different word, but like that's the word that we're using right now.
It's from the TikTok.
It's from a TikTok video on the TikToks.
It's seriously, but like it's like the gratitude, like, oh my God, like even yesterday when you came back, I like totally forgot I had already done it, but she was like, oh my God, thank you for vacuuming. Cause like she saw it in the room,
right?
You know, like the lines, and I was like, oh yeah.
Well, and that was the thing. And that was kind of like my mental note at the time was like, oh, like what Lee wants in return for this. And not that, they're not like, they're not
give me your gratitude.
Right. There's not the expectation, which I also think is like the difference as well. Like they're doing it without expectation of return. Like they're doing it because they're like, no, I want to do this for you. Right. But I also want to make sure that like they feel received and seen as well. And so in my want to have them feel received and seen, now I know that what that looks like for them is just sharing my gratitude. Which I am just super great. That's very authentic. Like it's not contrived like at all. It's not like, oh, I need to remember to show gratitude. It's like, I need to remember to say thank you. No, it's not that. It's like it's very authentic, right? But it's like I also know that's the added layer. The added layer is that I know that me showing my gratitude is also seeing them for their contribution to my life, right? And so it's like the layer of that. And so like, yeah, like, and so I've made that a practice. And again, not that I wouldn't have thanked them before, but it's like, I have that extra awareness, that extra attunement of like, I'm going to make sure that I notice the things that they do for me and show my gratitude for that, because that's what makes it a reciprocal relationship. It's like, I know that they're going to do things for me because they're an amazing partner and they want to. And I'm also going to like show my gratitude. And there's other ways that like, I contribute to their life in different ways as well. And like, yeah, it's just, it becomes it like as you do. I feel like I'm talking to men right now. I'm like,
send this to all your men.
I'm like,
friends.
as you do that, like as you practice that awareness, it's the same with self-awareness, right? It's like just relational awareness.
Yeah.
And as you practice that and as you get curious around that, it does become easier and easier and easier. And it does become like more fun and connecting and just like, it just fills you up, just like it fills my cup so much to just be like, oh, I'm doing the thing that I know that there's just gonna like have them absolutely gush, Like instead of just like guessing, instead of just being like, oh, well, I'm gonna do this thing and like, and my expectation is, or my hope is, which I would challenge you that if you're like, I hope they like it, I would just look underneath the hood, a little bit, just be like, do you have an expectation there? Do you? And this is any gender, like, but like, if you have like I hope that this works. It's like, do you have an expectation? Because I think that, not to say that hope and expectation are the same thing, they're not. But I think that sometimes that thought of like hopefulness can kind of mask expectations that we might have in our relationship. So just look, see if it's there. Try it on. Anything else that you want to share about lesbians wanting to have soft lives for each other?
Well, I love lesbians to start. And I think I was just thinking about this somewhere along the line in this conversation, but also in the context of, a lesbian relationship and everything, like all of the things that we just talked about are present. And then there's also that element to I think that is different because it is a queer relationship, right? It's a queer feminine type of energy relationship. And so there's also that added thing of like we're looking out for each other because we are in a queer dynamic and like, in the more marginalized groups of women, queer, other things that are probably present. And so it's like there's also just like, yeah, like, you know what? There's other stuff we gotta worry about in the world, but this is our soft landing place, right? And like really being intentional about creating that because it's like I think that's always makes the difference for me in partnerships is like this really is like the space that I can soften in, right? Like because it's like out in the world, I'm like, are we okay? Like kind of like tense and like looking out and da 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 da. And here it's like, oh, like I have like we're like she's looking out, I'm looking out, like we're there for each other, and like we're recognizing each other and what we're doing and all of that, and so it is that space where you can just like it's like the softness that like removes those like layers that very much harden us in like a heteronormative world too.
Yeah.
Heteronormative patriarchal world where it's like I can be my, mushy, tender, sensitive, emotional self.
Just talking about that.
Yeah, we're talking about last night, because it's like, in the outside world, people are always like look at me and I'm like all tatted up and like, I'm wearing baggy clothes and I'm like,
you're just a mask. You're not masked lesbian,
tatted
like, masked lesbian, and you look way tougher than you are.
Dude, I did like people have told me that ever since I was a little kid, actually. There was like, I thought you were like gonna be like super serious and like mean and whatever and tough, and they're like, and then you're just literally this tender goofball. and so but true. It's like, on the outside, like I'm a lot more like, because I'm being more aware and like kind of like okay, right? But here it's like, no, I can like all that little stuff, like I am super observant for a variety of reasons, but I'm like super observant. And
thank you. It's the trauma.
Yeah, it's the trauma. But it works for me in partnerships. But like I've always been like this, even as like a little kid with like pets and like animals. I'm like, oh well, they really love this thing, so I'm gonna do. Or I do that with like, my mom and like my sister and like friends, and I'm just like, oh, they da 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 da. But it's like, oh, like I get to really like explore that in my partnerships with the lovely female types. And and I don't have to think about like, oh, how I have to present myself or like, oh, is this, am I okay? Am I safe? Da 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 da. And so it really does just kind of remove those layers and in all that understanding of, what it is to be in a female body and all that comes with that. And it's just like, it's so nice. It is this like its own little sanctuary. Soft sanctuary. Yeah. The story of lesbian relationships.
And the thing that I want to add to like kind of the pitfall of this might be like we're not trying to romanticize lesbian relationships. It's more just talking about because like obviously there's still things in any relationship where there's going to be a lack of attunement or a lack of understanding. Like we are still two individual people.
You're still human.
You're still human. There's still like that individualness of like, yeah, my trauma or my understanding of things clashes up against their trauma and their understanding of things. Very much so sometimes. you know, and it's the so I don't want to, in this episode, I do not want to create the expectation that if you are in a queer relationship that everything is just hunky-dory all the time.
No.
You know, like that's not the case, and that's not the expectation, because like if you create that expectation, you might have the tendency to put queer relationships or lesbian relationships like on a pedestal and be like, oh, well, now that I'm in a lesbian relationship or a queer relationship, everything's going to be so much easier and better. And then if and when things go, you know, get hard for whatever reason, then like falling from that pedestal can be even harder, right? So this is not to put like queer and lesbian relationships on a pedestal. This is really just to point out that like when you have two people who are already practiced at attunement and compassion and understanding and curiosity for the other one in a relationship, like you're already kind of primed for that, that things are going to be naturally softer and easier in a lot of respects, right? But again, it's not to say that like things aren't going to clash. It's not to say that that expectations aren't going to be met. It's not to say that you're going to understand each other all the time. You won't. You will not. And for that too, like, and this is something that like we're currently really like, I wouldn't say learning wouldn't be the right word, but like deepening. That's actually probably a better word. Like deepening in our relationship is um the benefit of the doubt for the other one, right? Because there's been things that have happened in our relationship recently where it's like we misunderstood each other and it was like a really big breakdown, right? And it was really hurtful and it was hard to get through. And so it's like one of the things that we noticed in kind of talking this out is that like benefit of the doubt piece. It's like, no, we did have this misunderstanding, but we are here for each other and we are here to make each other's lives better, you know? And so like next time when we have this like breakdown or this type of a breakdown, right? Like let's try and remember that, because I feel like that was something that was like missing, right? So also inside of like this softness and wanting to have this softness for each other is also in breakdowns as well, is also like, you know, and that's kind of one of the things that our therapist says to us on like a fairly regular basis is like, y'all are still trying to not impact each other. And so I think that that's kind of the shadow side of wanting softness for the other person. The shadow side of it is like, not avoiding is not the maybe avoiding is the right word, like avoiding certain things or wanting to not say things or wanting to not do things because you will impact the other person possibly negatively, right? But like so I think one of the things that I'm discovering inside of softness right now is that you still have to say the thing that's true for you and then work through the hardness of that in order to get back to the softness, right? And in that way, like doing the hard thing is also doing the soft thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just, I mean, because there's can weave in softness even in the hardness of it, right? And I think that's like the maybe a foundation that gets a little bit more clearer in these like, you know, queer dynamics. Because it's like, oh, we're very practiced in that, you know, even when the hard thing is present, is happening, it's like you can, you know, still come into that sense of like, oh yeah, but this is also the person who is like, you know, I have clear evidence that like this person is like looking out and everything. And so, you know, then it just comes, it just circles right back to like the intentionality of it, right? And so it's being able to bring in those experiences into challenges too.
Yeah, it's like there's already, I love that, there's already evidence in this relationship of like, no, this person really is looking out for me. They really do have I can look and see, excuse me, I can look and see in our relationship. and be like, no, there is this like foundation of like care and thoughtfulness and understanding and, you know. Yeah, totally. I love everything that we talked about today.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Anything
Go
else?
lesbians.
Anything else that you want to share?
No, that's it. Go lesbians.
Hashtag team lesbians.
All the way.
Actually, this podcast episode could be like what you could learn from lesbian relationships.
Men. Send to all your bro friends. And then to all the bro friends, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. What you can learn from queer and lesbian relationships. There you go. There you go.
Anything else for you?
No, I love you.
Oh, I love you.
We love you.
Love you. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Queer Love Podcast. We would love to hear from you. Drop us a line on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at Queer Love Relationships, or email us at queerloverelationships@gmail.com. If you are interested in working with us, follow the Linktree link in the show notes. See if our offers resonate with you, and if they do, sign up with us or book a discovery session. We are so grateful that you're here, listening, learning, and growing with us. Until next time, keep loving.